Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to learn from both Kathy and Cindy this evening. They both are so passionate about helping youth and young adults getting in charge of getting around and how to become an independent traveler with big decisions that you and your children may face. So please enjoy and learn a whole lot from Kathy and Cindy. Thank you both for being here this evening.
Thank you, Melissa. We're so glad you've turned out for this. It is a favorite topic for Kathy and me, so we welcome any questions you want to put in the chat. And the last slide will have our email. Please reach out for further discussion, because I know as a family, transportation, how you get around, is a huge topic. And that title, I think of it as the take charge energy. I got this. And I think that's both what Kathy and I demonstrate in this. So the next slide has a picture of a person, lady heading out the door. And it took me a while to get my head around I am proud of the skills I've developed as an active traveler. But it's a perspective, it's a mindset, it's an attitude that has taken time for me to develop, and that I talk with students about, because it is a different way of managing where you need to be than the so many people around you, whether it's peers, the teenagers or siblings, or all the adults who drive. That we see that again and again. But this, how do I feel good about it? And that recognizing it's not a perfect system. Driving is not a perfect system. It has its frustrations too. But I think what Kathy and I are going to talk about, especially in this part one, is looking at the skill set that helps make it less frustrating. And that next slide, we've got our goals. There are many decisions that in managing those adult responsibilities, and if you think of as a parent, those many things that you're doing in your vehicle, errands I'm running, things that you're doing along the route to and from work, helping the young people recognize how they're going to manage that. And then those travel needs that come along with that if you are not at the wheel in your vehicle. We're going to talk about the specific skills and those two words: to manage transportation safely, because that is a crucial concern, and efficiently. So, you get where you need to be on time. And then we'll have some practical suggestions for family involvement. And until we actually had, the next slide shows a 1950s version of the prototype of what would be a Google car. It's more and more in the headlines. They are coming, but we've got a ways before that's going to happen. And one of the students made the comment when I visited with them about transportation options: I'm waiting for the Google car. They have a different perspective on this than I think, say, in the 80s and 90s, or in the past 15 to 20 years. So there's more options out there for this young generation. Your turn, Kathy.
All right. Great. Thanks. So when you start thinking about the idea of transportation for kids with visual impairments, of course, you have, a team. It's likely that you have a team working with your student. You have your VI, and your comms is a really important person in this process, and other people on the team as well, since they're working with the student on a day-to-day basis also. So some questions that we typically think about talking to students about when we're thinking about planning for future empowered travel or active travel is to ask them to start thinking about, where do you want to live? You know, what kind of community do you want to live in? Do you want to live in a rural or in a city or urban, you know, those kinds of things that come up, so that you can start thinking about what transportations are options are available in those places. I grew up in a very super tiny small town, and as much as I would have loved to stay at home with my family, I knew that that really wasn't going to be an option for me because of the lack of access that I would have had. We also talk about with students inquiring about their interests and what kind of activities they want to participate in outside of their schoolwork. If you have a kiddo who is, you know, happy to, is, you know, likes to be at home, likes to be, you know, doesn't really care so much about getting out with friends, you know, that might shape where that child wants to live in the future. If you have somebody who's very involved in extracurriculars and likes to be out and about, then, you know, you may, that may impact the kind of transportation or city that the student lives in. What skills do you need to work on for traveling independently? And I feel like that was probably the trickiest part for me, is just knowing what I didn't know, and knowing what I needed to work on to be able to be as active as possible. And I think that process continues into adulthood. I think I'm still working on learning what skills I need to learn. And then as we talked about before, how do these skills, these decisions, these answers to these questions affect your travel needs and how you budget for your transportation? Like Cindy says, we get a lot of students who say, oh, I'm just gonna Uber every day. And I'm like, well, let's actually think about how much it costs to Uber to and from work every day. I don't want to jump too much into the second part because then none of you guys will show up for it. But I did, you know, that's another thing that we hear quite often. And, you know, as Cindy said, this active traveler is kind of a mindset, and it's, I think of it sometimes as the opposite of like non-driver. You know, a non-driver to me sounds like I don't do this, I can't do this. Whereas an active traveler, it sounds a little bit more empowering to me, and it makes me feel a little bit more like I'm active to the extent that I want to be. As opposed to just, I do everything 100% by myself, because I don't think that's a realistic thing to strive for. I think we all seek help in a variety of areas. So it's important for us as family members or instructional team members to help our children feel positive about being an active traveler. And I also think it's important to note that this can come and go. I hate to compare it to grief, but you know how people say grief comes in cycles. I think that this is similar. Some days I feel great, and some days it's a struggle. But thinking about things like, you know, being an active traveler and you know, using public transportation is an environmentally friendly option. Your community connections are at ground level because you're walking through those neighborhoods and communities every day. You're engaging with people who are riding your same bus routes and things of that nature. You know, at times, well, because you not owning a vehicle, it may be that you have more funds to use in other areas and less stress about having to fix something that's broken or, you know, something that's not working, or replace things. And I think the less stress can come and go, because I think there are, you know, different stresses, whether you're a driver or you're an active traveler. So I think it's, you know, just kind of shaping that perspective for them so that they feel like this is an option, this is a good choice that I'm making. It's not just a limitation. We also talked about how it's important to help students and children or kids find role models for building the skill set of becoming an active traveler. And there's, you know, it can be difficult to make those connections, especially in smaller communities. But I think that's again where your teams and your area supports, state agencies can also help with that, so that students have somebody to talk to about, you know, how they've navigated active traveling, or you know, or even navigating driving with limitations or whatever it is. We have to redefine spontaneity and convenience a little bit, because sometimes you have to wait and sometimes you can't always just do something at the last minute, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're limited in the ability to do everything you might want to do. And then the other thing that sometimes can be a contender is that we're just a society with a century of auto ownership, and that's what's familiar. And so that's what it feels comfortable to think about and talk about that with your peers, because everybody's doing it. Everybody's parents and grandparents have done it. And so it just feels like that's how it should be. And so it's important to kind of spend some time reframing and shaping that perspective, because it can be hard to be one out of a group of friends that's not doing what the other kids are doing. And so we've talked a little bit about some of the questions you might ask and reshaping a perspective, and we'll move into active traveler readiness. And so, as I mentioned before about working with a team, as we talk about these skills and about these things that can be worked on, that definitely can be worked on at home, as Cindy said in the goals slide, we're looking at practical ways of doing this. So of course you would want to make sure that you're communicating with your child's comms if they have one, and the TBI about what skills are they working on and what does that look like and what are the evaluations saying, so that you guys are connected and you're doing all the same thing. You're kind of working collaboratively and working on the same things as opposed to kind of opposite each other. Plus, they're a really great resource to tell you kind of how to support you in figuring out how these things can happen. So we think about practice I lead, which is looking ahead and predicting your route and scanning and checking your periphery and seeing like what's coming up. What are some obstacles that are ahead? Practice following a 3-step route. Reversing the route, and then also mental mapping a route, or even just regular mapping a route, kind of drawing it out or creating it in a tactile way, in a very simple tactile map, which again, you could get support from your children's service provider, or their team members. Check out a range of intersections and talk about traffic flow, because there are a variety of different kinds of intersections. I'm not even going to pretend to know that to sound like I know all of them, but there's a variety of different types and different types of signals and different kinds of protection at intersections. And so are you looking at a T or a 4-way stop, or and who's supposed to be doing what when? And I think, again, this is where I think like safety comes in, and I think it's really important to be using the same strategies and language that your child is getting in their instructional time. But I also think it's really a cool idea to think that you guys could just add some more walking or some more active travel in your own day-to-day lives, and just kind of commenting and describing what's happening as you're taking the lead, just so your student is becoming aware of that, intersections or otherwise. Make a game of traffic sign identification. So, just looking for different kinds of signs in the environment. What do they mean? What are the salient features that you can pick out? How far away can you pick those out if you have vision? And of course, riding bikes and other wheels or together can allow you to practice turns and navigation and know maybe like how much time to anticipate for that turn or movement. So bikes, scooters, roller skates, all those types of things. And then I think we're back to you, Cindy.
Yep. I'll add a little more to what Kathy was opening with on active traveler skills. And this is that family involvement. And I think as a child grows up, as a second grader, you'll practice getting active traveler readiness a little differently than you would a 6th grader or a 10th grader. We refer to that active passenger role, and in some of the workshops we do on travel, the comment comes up frequently. Okay, my kid has his or her face in the phone screen, and they're not paying attention to, can they get to grandma's house? Can they get to the grocery store that you go to? The car doesn't move until you tell me, do we do a left turn or right turn? How many blocks is it? So they eyes up and paying attention and watching for what the driver does. Driving is a very demanding task. And I think that role as a passenger, there are responsibilities for when you're in that co-pilot seat. Gauging the student interest. In the second session, Kathy and I will go much more in depth on the alternative modes of transportation, whether it's biking, whether it's rideshare, whether it's the bus, but gauging student interest on, I want to maybe do a little more biking, or the bus. I want to practice the bus. And I think that it's a different way to think of a family traveling together, but not driving it. So that together as a family, we're practicing. Say if you go to San Antonio, they have a bus system and there's rideshare there and taxi availability. And some routes are very walkable. So you're kind of balancing those systems out. And the first 5 times you do something is the hardest. It gets easier after that. That working out an exchange rate. If I am routinely taking a ride from somebody, I want to, I pay for lunch twice a month, or where there's the acknowledgement of you are helping me out with something and I want to respond in kind. We all take favors occasionally, but I want students to recognize be careful how that becomes a pattern that may not be healthy for a relationship. Estimating and we talk about the budget is both time. The friend called it, it's my time or it's my dime. Time and money for me getting a sense. Both Kathy and I could know if I'm going to work, how much is that going to cost on rideshare or my bus, or I'm getting to a friend's house who is across town. So you're estimating that. And then a travel account. If there are other kids in the home who there's family support for a vehicle or gas, is there similar support for a child who may be doing rideshare or hiring a driver on occasion? So next slide. This example of, I don't get into high schools that much anymore, but the few times that I do, that those hallways it is truly a traffic pattern. And I like when students can recognize that I need to identify what might be hazards. And we all do this. If you're walking down the grocery store aisle, you're kind of looking for who's not paying attention, whose cart is in the middle of where I'm trying to get by. So you're identifying the hazards. You're predicting, okay, what if I do this, what could happen? If I do this, what could happen? Deciding the action I'm going to take and then executing it. And I think that's helping, talking with our kids about you may not actually be aware you're doing it, but thinking it through. So kind of demonstrating that. And then the next slide, that idea of the responsibilities, how is it different when you're not at the wheel? And I commented on that co-pilot, that active passenger. I have a part of the planning and compensating for the ride, paying for it. Expense decision we've talked about, being flexible with when the ride changes. What's my plan B if I've got to get to a meeting, or I've set this up far enough ahead that we've got cushion time. And then making good use of wait time. Whether you're catching up on things on your phone, or you always have a book, or my bus is delayed 20 minutes, I know I can get the 2 phone calls in that I need to do that I won't need to do this evening. So it's, having those things in mind that are going to make that time good use of time. Back to you, Kathy.
Yeah, I like that because as a passenger, I like to, navigate or play DJ, or more importantly, hold the fry container for the driver, all that stuff's super important. So cost of operating a vehicle, we'll just do this pretty quickly, but as drivers, it's cool to talk to kids about what they think about how much these things cost per month: car payment, gas insurance, tags, tolls, parking, and maintenance on, tires or dead batteries or any of those things. And then kind of coming up with a monthly cost, and just giving them an idea of how much that costs. And then you can compare it to, rideshare, bus, Uber. I mean, Uber's rideshare, but, other forms of transportation, hiring a driver, et cetera. And so I think it's important to think about those things and help them think about those things as well. I had no idea how much it cost until I actually sat down and looked at it.
The national average says $900 a month. Even if we took that down by $250, that is a price tag. And I think it helps students to, wow.
That makes me feel so much better about my Uber Eats and Lyft rides that I take every week. All right. So travel skills for students. Some things that can be worked on across environments, homeschool and community, using travel tools like GPS apps, maps, compass, timetables, use of optical devices, binoculars, magnifiers, obtaining pertinent travel information. How do you get that from your phone, from the internet? Back in the day, we had the bus brochures that unfolded like a map. Building those interpersonal skills to deal with questions and comments in the public, or just chatty bus riders. Practicing critical thinking skills, problem solving, I think is super important for our kids to practice in all areas. And just having, the idea of what's a plan B, what's plan C, what happens if this happens. And then choosing the appropriate times for your self-advocacy and assertiveness. So this could be accepting or declining help, and it could also be asking for help. Sometimes that can be a really difficult thing to navigate. So it's that whole self-determination piece of the old expanded core curriculum. And then it's just important to be prepared. And so we have this quote here: "There's no such thing as bad weather, only unsuitable clothing," which I have been caught in many times. Cindy?
And yeah, in that travel skills slide where Kathy had commented on the getting travel directions, I think anticipating a route, and we go back to the when
I'm sorry.
you're helping the student, if you're in the vehicle and it's, let's count traffic lights. Because Kathy and I both know when we were learning routes, okay, I know I go past a Walgreens and a Whataburger and get ready after that Whataburger is my bus stop. So you're finding those landmarks. And I call ahead to try to get as specific a direction. If it's a new part of town for me, can you give me the color of the building, the sign, the color of the sign? So I'm getting those visual details and kind of getting a preview of the route. And so it's just a sample set of questions that I think can be helpful in demonstrating to the young person, here's how you're starting to predict your route. And the next slide shows this resource may be available. It's now the second edition is being published by TSBVI Curriculum. It's Finding Wheels. Dr. Ann Korn is a bioptic driver, and Dr. Penny Rosenblum is an active traveler. And I have found it to be, it's a quick read, pick and choose the activities that match, in your situation. Your TVI or comms may have access to it and want to say, devote a particular chapter. If a student, I really want to get into using rideshare, then they can really focus their attention there. And that takes us up to, we really hope you'll be able to join us for part 2. We're going to get way more specific on, I think we have 6 or 7 different modes of travel that Kathy and I use. And as both of us have lived in different sizes of communities, yes, moved to the bigger city for more options. But when I ask students in our workshop, not all of them want to do that. They say, I'm not liking the urban scene. So knowing that in any size of community, there are options, and that's what we'll focus on in 2 weeks, June 21st. We really appreciate you being here.
Hey, Melissa, I'm
ahead,
going to
sure.
stop share so I can put our email addresses in the chat. Is that okay?
Absolutely, and I did put them in there.
Oh, okay, great.
Hopefully I spelled everything correctly, but feel free to double check and put that in there. I was like 90, I've kept checking back and forth. But I honestly cannot thank you. As a parent of a child, I know that we are also kind of on the verge of a lot of these big decisions, and there were a couple questions. I know that it is being recorded. It'll take a couple weeks. It'll be up, but I know for myself, I am going to go through this like multiple times. And I can't thank you both for all of your information and wealth of knowledge and experience. And thank you so much for such an amazing webinar.